Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It is April 12th, 2022. Welcome to the 47th CALLERLAB Convention in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Today is April 12th, 2022, and the name of this session is Teaching in the Real World. I am Bob Riggs and will serve as the moderator for this session. My co-panelist is Mike Olivieri. And so we're going to get into this. This session came out of the fact that over the last 10 years we've heard lots of presentations, very good presentations, on learning styles of dancers. And my comment overall to folks was, well, it's really nice to know that people learn by seeing, by hearing, by doing, kinesthetically, whatever, all of those learning styles. But when I stand up to teach a class, I stand up in front of a group, I look out there and I see all 3 to 27 learning styles, depending on whose definition of learning style you're using. And we have to approach how we teach and how we call to all of them simultaneously. And so this session is sort of an example of how do we teach in that world where every kind of learning style exists, and different ages, different temperaments, different attitudes, the ones that had a bad day, the one that had a good day, we have to teach in the real world. So, to start off this session with that sort of thought in our head, I'm going to have Mike Olivieri start this afternoon. Mike has been calling for 24 years in, I think all of it in Colorado. Most of it. Yeah. And we have been contemporaries, competitors, cooperators, you name it. We've known each other for a long time. And so we'll start off with Mike.
Thank you. All right, so teaching in the real world, okay? Like you said, we've gone over the different teaching styles and stuff like that. Mine is how I operate my classes. When I start a new class, clear through the end of class. First thing is, when I start the class, I'll get them up in a great big circle. Tell them don't need a partner, just come on out and make a circle. If you need a partner, raise your hand. Of course, you got music going on in the background, hopefully. So I usually put on All About the Bass or something that's got a good beat to it that just, gets them out there and say, okay, so everybody join up hands. Okay, circle to the left, circle to the right, circle to the left, circle to the right. You're dancing, we're going to do this all night for 2 hours. Circle to the left, circle to the right. Okay, and then I stop them. Okay, and I tell them, we have a couple rules in square dance. I said, rule number 1, as you've already seen, it has to be fun. Otherwise, why are we doing this, okay? Rule number 2, the caller, the instructor, whoever is holding this microphone is always right. That's the reaction I get. Everybody laughs, especially the angels, okay? Because they know better. Rule number 3, whenever possible, hold hands with someone. And you can see everybody kind of, moving around to hold hands. Rule number 4, whenever possible, hold hands with someone. Rule number 5, whenever possible, hold hands with someone. If you have not gotten the idea that holding hands is important, I can go through rules 6 through 10. And everybody's like, we got it. Okay? Good. All right. So, now to the teaching order and why. There's been several different types of teaching orders that I know of. And again, it comes down to everybody has their own teaching order. You can follow the CALLERLAB list. You can create your own. You can go look at the knowledge base and find out what other people do. I've developed my own that seems to work pretty well. In that case, if you are teaching more than one class per week, I teach for 3 or 4 different clubs, so I'm gone all the time. As soon as you are done that night, no matter what happens when you get home, Go on the computer, go on your checklist, whatever, mark down what you did for that club. Because at some point they are going to blend together and you will lose entirely all track of what you have been teaching. Okay? We have rules for angels. Everybody should have a handout, Square Dance Angels. Two-sided sheet, hopefully. I hand those out to my angels on the first night and say, please read this. I'm not going to go over the whole thing because it is a document that's available on the CALLERLAB site. But it basically tells them what to do. I also tell everybody, there is only one instructor in the class. That's whoever's holding the microphone. I have an apprentice caller that's working with me that he teaches some of my classes also. You will find angels during the breaks. They're going to try to teach people. Breaks are breaks. Let them take a break. And if they're trying to teach somebody, I walk up and say, look, what's going on? Well, they're having problems with right and left through. Okay, great, take a break. I'll work that on the next session. Okay? People need the break. They don't need to be continually teaching during the breaks. Okay? Bob kind of touched on it. Mixed ages. What do you do if you got kids and grown-ups together? For kids, you show up to them more than twice, it's boring. For us, for our age, we got to see it at least 150 times to get the idea of it. Take the kids aside. Say, kids, you guys are doing great. I need you to help me. Lawrence is having problems. So whenever you dance with Lawrence, try to help him get to where he's supposed to be. And they're like, oh, okay, I get to help the caller. This is great. And they'll work with you really, really well. Okay? Styles, definitions, demo squares, props, things like that. Different styles of how they learn. Definition, people read by, learn by reading. Demo, some people learn by seeing. That's what Bob was alluding to. When I first started calling, I had a horrible time trying to teach grand square. Yes, it seems simple. For some reason, people just wouldn't catch on to it. And I was at a caller school. Caller came up with a great idea. Okay? If I can get 8 people out here, it doesn't have to be all guys and girls, just if I can get 8 people out real quick in a semi-square type thing. And what the idea was once they're squared up, okay, I bring out a roll of painter's tape. And I will say, here, take this in and hold it. That was a good sound over the microphone. What? And I run it out. Here you go. Lawrence, if you can grab a hold of that. And put that on the floor, in between the 2 people there.
Like this?
Great, thank you. You're doing a wonderful job of putting tape on the floor. Okay. I would also advise, if you're going to do this, buy the high quality tape. It's much easier to get off the floor, okay? A little visual demonstration. They've placed an X on the floor with painter's tape. So it's between the couples, okay? I tell them rules of the game. If you're close enough to touch the person you're looking at, you're going to back away 3 steps. If not, you're going to walk forward 3 steps, okay? So, it starts off with what we call sides face. So the side couples turn to face each other. Can you touch them? Yes. Heads, can you touch each other walking forward? Okay, everybody take 3 steps. Go. Go 1, 2, 3. Turn and face the person next to you. They may be clear across. Same rules. If you can touch them, back up. If not, go forward. Go. Turn and face the person next to you. Same rules. Go. 1, 2, 3. Turn. Same rules. Go. Everybody freeze right where they're at. You're back at the home position. From here, you retrace your steps. Kind of like the old movies where they'd be tracking the bandit, and the bandit in the snow or sand or whatever would start backing up and covering up their footprints. Just retrace your steps. So, everybody go. Go 1, 2, 3. Turn. 1, 2, 3. Turn. 1, 2, 3. Turn. 1, 2, 3. You're home and the crowd goes wild. They're like, this is great, okay? That tape really helps. The other thing that helps, stay there if you would please. The other thing that helps is people associate calls with music. If I can find it this time, okay? And I tell them that we're going to go ahead, and I found this piece of music that works really great. And when we turn, we're going to clap. Down a little bit on that one. Good. And And I said, I found this piece of music that has the clap built in to beat number 4. Michael Jackson's Thriller. And the whole crowd will like, we're going to dance to Thriller? And you'll see the kids out there going, we're doing the hand movement, okay? And I'll tell them, when the music starts, just listen to the music and you'll hear that clap on the 4th beat. And it goes through all the background noise. By the way, this version of Thriller is on Amazon, 99 cents, $1.29, Thriller karaoke. And I'll tell them, now listen, 2, 3, clap. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So I tell them on the turn, clap your hands, ready? Sides, face, grand, square, go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, reverse. And that's about how long it takes for the new dancers to learn it. Okay, we go ahead and put that on pause or turn it down. So what happens, thank you, I'll give the square of a hand, okay? Nice. So what happens is I teach 2 groups at different senior centers in the Denver area. And they're like, we'll take a couple weeks off because of snow or whatever. And we'll come back and we're going to do grand square. And everybody goes, you never taught us that. And all I have to do is go, oh yeah, that one. And they can do it. But they don't remember what it's called until you put the music on it. If I try doing grand square right off the bat with a different piece of music, they're not going to make it. Do it with Thriller, then do it with something else, and they're fine. So music plays a big part on lessons. So definitely be careful what music you use. All right, I print out I should have brought those too. I print out little business cards that have both Tammy twirlers and Saddlebrook squares on them. If they want to go look on their phone, on the computer, at live people or checkers, and I have little business cards that I print up, hand those out. Okay, it also has CALLERLAB on it, so if they want to go look for the definitions. Obviously, when you're teaching, you do not want to get caught in a position where you have to teach another call that you were not planning on to get out of a certain formation to get them back home. A lot of homework, a lot of research. I was told with the first club that I did lessons for, I was told by the president of the club, whatever call you teach during the session, we expect you to use it in the singing call. And I was like, why? Why would I have to use it in a singing call? Well, a few weeks later, I went to someone else's class as a guest, went out, danced, caller worked a particular call, taught it, worked it, did a singing call, never put it in the singing call. And I'm like, that's why. You're kind of like disappointed. It's like, I just learned this call and we never used it. So try to use the calls in a singing call. Cal Campbell, who unfortunately passed away recently, has a great document out there. Can't remember the exact name of it, but anyway, he's got all the basic calls with figures that you can use in singing calls for just the one call. Do-sa-do, circle left, circle right, whatever that call is for the first basic calls.
What was that name?
Calvin Campbell, C-A-M-P-B-E-L-L. Okay? And if you can't find it there, send me an email. My name is on the top of the Square Dance Angel list, and I can get it to you, okay? But he's got each individual call broke out with figures and patterns that you can use on singing calls when you're teaching a class for the first basic calls. Let's see, breaks. Breaks not too long, and like I said, breaks are for breaks, not for teaching by angels. The hardest thing, and I'm sure you've all run into this, you have to remain positive and energetic over the microphone, okay? I mean, you know, even though Joan in the back can't dance, she has no rhythm, she moves the wrong way every time, don't pick her out by name on the microphone. Try to be positive and enthusiastic, you know. There are nights where, you know, I'll call my wife on the way home and say, I'm on my way home, and she's like, okay, I'm gonna lock myself in my room, I can tell you had a bad night, just by the way I sound. It gets frustrating, and it gets very hard to do, but don't lash out at the students or new dancers over the microphone. No way, shape, or form. let's see. Some nights, I'm sure everybody's run into this too, real world, because of everything going on. There are some nights that it's not going to be a class. The whole floor will forget circle left. Okay? So it's going to be just a review night, just a fun night, practice night. You may not get anything taught. Don't expect to follow your lesson plan exactly. There are nights when I've had a bad day and I can't remember circle left. Same thing. I'm just going to call and have fun and just play with them. Bob never has that problem. Language. Half, 3/4, quarter. You know, promenade half, touch a quarter, spin the top, 3/4. Not just steps, but walls, steps, degrees. Again, people learn in different ways. If you got somebody that's mathematical, you tell them 270 degrees and they're like, perfect, got that, okay? But not everybody knows that. The other thing that we started within the last few years that seems to help is either myself or the class coordinator will send out an email to the group with calls we just learned and what I plan to teach the next week. There's a lot of people out there that will go out online, look up those calls, watch the videos, see what goes on, so they have some idea of what the call involves. It's not going to teach them, but they'll have something they can look forward to expect. Okay, here's what's supposed to happen. Okay? Again, music. Harry Chapin's Circle, which is out there on a square dance label. Okay? When you teach them circle, use circle. All my life's a circle, sunrise to sundown. Okay? It just kind of blends in with it and kind of subliminally, you know, whatever that is, puts it in their mind. Okay? I told you I had an assistant caller that helps me. If you have that chance, have somebody help you. The more voices they hear, the better they will be at dances. When I was taught square dancing, I learned under one caller. He did all our classes. The first time I was invited to a beginner dance, I had no idea what that caller up there was saying. Nothing I ever learned. You know, it just sounds totally different. So the more voices, have a guest caller come in for a night. Bob and I have traded classes back and forth. Just, again, because the more voices they hear for those calls, the better they'll be at regular dances. Flourishes. Do we teach them? Don't we? I do. I wait till they get ready to go to beginner dances, and then I will say, I need to show you some stuff that you're going to run into at dances. The Hungarian or swing do-si-do, the twirl to ladies when they weave the ring, the patty cake when they go in and do the square through four. Do I approve of them? Not necessarily. But if they are going to do them, they are going to learn to do them correctly. And that's why I teach them. So when we do the swing do-si-do, which everybody knows what that is, right? No? Okay. Joan, well, come on up. The swing do-si-do or the Hungarian do-si-do, as it's called, is not the traditional do-si-do. When we meet in do-si-do, we're going to walk in, put our arms around each other like this, and then, you know, go from there. Now the problem is, Joan, is 99% of the times when we do the do-si-do, the dancers wind up in an ocean wave. And I tell them, that is not where you wind up at the end of a do-si-do. You wind up facing the person you were looking at. Because if the next call is a star through or a right and left through, you guys are way off base to do that. So thank you, John. Okay? So if they're going to do the flourishes, I want them to learn to do them correctly. And that's why I teach them. All right, sound effects. And I find my classes are really enjoying the sound effects. Like when we do a slide through, we do, you know, or pass the ocean, or track, or not track two, but double pass through with the clap, clap, clap. And I tell them, I teach them to do the double pass through with the clap, 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 because we have a caller in northern Colorado that hates that. So I teach it, and I tell them, clap real loud. And they enjoy that, just like this, okay? So the different sound effects do help. Do we use a lot of filler words? Don't we? Again, depends on the real world. Have the dancers had a good day? Are they listening to what you're saying? Are they picking up on it? Start them out with filler words and then back off, okay? You know, heads right and left through, right pull by, turn that lady around. Guys, push her around to face back in. And that word push is like, I can push her around. And I tell them it's gently, okay? So it gets the idea in their heads. And then after a while, it's just a right and left through. What to do to break down, what to do when you break down the square. And I will teach this towards the end of the class. Tell them lines or get back home, depending on whether it's singing or patter. And I tell them, this is the hardest thing I have to do, is to try to break down a square while they're calling, because I don't like to break down squares, I like to have them dancing. So I will deliberately call faster, stack the calls a little bit so they get lost and they break down. So they learn how to do it. Go back to lines or go back to squares. Discussion this morning in a group. Separate dancers, don't separate dancers. If they come as a couple. There are ways to do that without pinpointing them or pointing them out specifically and saying, you know, we have to break you guys up. You just can't dance together, okay? 4 ladies chain across. Okay, guys, we're going to dance with the opposite lady for a while. You've now split up that couple, but you didn't just pick on them. Everybody did it. So everybody's in the same boat. And then get them back together. Tell dancers, don't think about it, just do it. I'll pick on other dancers. I'll go, you'll see people out there concentrating so hard, they forget to breathe. So you kind of watch that, you go, Lawrence, breathe. And he's, yeah, and I go, okay. You know, and everybody laughs, and everybody breathes too. So just tell them not to think about it, just do the call. Teaching the EMS, the emergency medical signal. Make sure you do that. Because a lot of people I talk to do not know what that is, and that's available on the CALLERLAB website also. I had 1 year, I wish I could take it back. I had 1 year I was teaching 3 classes, and every night that I taught the EMS signal, where everybody raises their hand, the following week that club would come back and say, I was at a dance over the weekend and we had a dancer go down in our square. 3 weeks in a row, and I'm like, I'm not teaching this anymore. So, one of the big thing about classes, how people learn, has nothing to do with square dance, nothing to do with the instructor, nothing to do with the angels. It's the social aspect. If you can have a meal before, go out after class to a fast food place, get an ice cream cone, whatever, and invite the group to go with you. That develops that camaraderie and the social aspect, and it really, really gels the class together. Okay? One of the other things that I've had to teach, which is really different, is I am teaching in a roundabout way, telling my new dancers, at the end of the dance, try to go up and thank the caller and cuer if you had a good time. Okay? A lot of times there'll be a reception line, you'll see people up in line, this is what they're doing. They don't know that. You have to tell them. It seems kind of contradictory that I'm telling them to come thank me. But it's also, if they go to Bob's dance, they need to thank Bob, okay? And a lot of the new dancers don't know that. So make sure you, at one point during the class, you cover that. Because I've seen a lot of the new classes from other callers, dance is done, they leave, boom. They didn't know they were supposed to do that, and it's kind of like, did I do something wrong during the dance? Did they have fun? You know, they were talking, laughing, enjoying everything, but at the end of the dance, they just leave. And it's like, wow. And then it dawned on me, nobody ever told them about that. They've seen the line up front, but they don't know what it is. You know, their instructor never told them. Last but not least, I tell people that square dancing is like the is like the land of the misfit toys in the Christmas movie. Not everybody is the same. Not everybody fits in. But for some reason, square dancing seems to bring all those people together and level the floor as such. And everybody kind of goes, yeah, I mean, if you think about it, we've got dancers that are missing arms, missing hands, have prosthetics on, maybe not walk too well, but they come to the dance and everybody has fun and dances with them. So that's why I like to call it the land of the misfit toys, and everybody fits in well. Any questions? Okay, I went through a lot of stuff real quick.
Anybody?
All right.
Before we move on?
I'll say something. Hi, Elaine McKenna, Amsterdam, New York. One thing about teaching the flourishes and stuff like that, I'd like to see more male callers teach skirt work, because we have the beautiful dresses. We like to wear them. They're meant to swoosh and swirl, and I teach it. And
Very good point. Very good point.
and then also about,
Go ahead.
at the end of the dance, teach your dancers also to stay until the end of the dance. It's impolite to leave during it, stuff
Right.
like that. Thank you.
Right, yeah, some of the ethics of the dancing. For the flourishes, you're absolutely right. I do that on ladies chain across, okay? For some reason in Colorado, ladies were taught to put their right hand behind their back as a target. And I tell them, according to the definition of CALLERLAB, that is not correct. I tell them, ladies, your right hand is free doing skirt work. And then I tell them, your right hand is also free, so if that guy puts his hand somewhere other than the small of your back, and that's all I say. And everybody laughs. It's like, I didn't tell you to do anything with it. I'm just saying it's free. Okay? So yes, and then ladies center in the men's sachet. Woo! Okay? And I tell them, again, skirt work, ladies, you know. And some of them will take their t-shirts or their blouse and just pick it up a little bit, you know, since they're not wearing their skirts. It's just fun things like that. And again, if you don't teach them, they don't know. So, yes. Somebody else had a question over here?
Blaine Nupp from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I really like what you said about holding hands, holding hands, holding hands. The one thing though is you tell them when to not hold hands, so that after they do like a pull by, that they're not hanging on to that person.
Yes, and I shouldn't say luckily, but in most of my classes I have a lady who at a dance, experienced dancers, a lady she was dancing with, she was dancing the guy's part, lady held onto her arm, pulled it back, and literally pulled her shoulder out of its socket. So she wears a sling, and when she doesn't wear the sling, she's usually at my lessons, and I teach them exactly that. And I'll pick on her, I'll say, Sue, okay, Sue is my victim over here. Sue is going to remind me that whenever you do a right-left grand, a pull-by, a square through, when you get side-by-side, drop hands, let go. And then I'll hang on to somebody, like if I'm dancing with Bob, I'll say, you know, Sally, come on out here. And I'll say, we're doing a square through 4. Sally's got to go that way, okay? But if I hang on to her, she goes the wrong way, and it's my fault. It's always the guy's fault. And everybody laughs again, okay? So I try to demonstrate that, yes, you got to hang on to that, you know, let go of that end. The other thing I do is when they're in lines of 4, that is the hardest place for new dancers to hang on to hands. So I tell them when they get lines of 4, I'll say, okay, I'm going to start counting. 1, 2, 3, 4, and see how long it takes for everybody in that line to hold hands. And when they're standing there like this and I start counting, 1, 2, you'll see all of a sudden it's like, and I'll tell them the highest I ever got in any class was 7. And people are looking at me like, why are you still counting? And then people will go, oh yeah. Yeah. So it's just a fun little thing to do. And after a while, it just becomes automatic.
Lawrence Johnstone, Ukiah, California. One thing about handholds also is sometimes people needed to be reminded about not grabbing. Just a light pressure. Guys, it's not a dish rag, you do not wring it out.
Right. It's just a little counterbalance move. The other thing that gets a laugh is when I do an Alaman left for the first time. I'll have them shake hands with their partner. Shake right hands with your partner. Say, hi partner. Turn around and face your partner. Shake right hands. Now, shake left hands. Move that left hand up to just below the elbow. This is called a forearm grip. And grip is just a term. I don't want to see fingerprints, bruises, anything like that. And they'll all laugh, and I say, yeah, you laugh. I said, but my wife has come home and showed me her arm, and I say, okay, you dance with Bill, George, you know, and they'll laugh. I said, it's just supposed to be a grip, just a nice little, you know, my hand is there, and this is what we're going to do as a counterbalance. So I do try to tell them that. And the other rule I tell them, nothing in square dance should hurt. If you have a shoulder problem, you have a hip problem, you have a leg problem, you have an equilibrium problem, we have ways around that. Ask me, we'll show you. Okay? Rather than do a star through and get clear up here and your shoulder hurts, just do a tap and turn. Okay? And we'll teach them all that stuff.
Dave Harry, Washington, talking about lesson plans. I've got a fairly elaborate lesson plan that I've laid out for my teaching, to the point where it tells me what I taught 4 weeks ago, and it's all color-coded, so I know all of that. But on the facing page, I use paper copy. I don't use computer for my lesson plan. I used to, and I found that that's way too difficult to work with. But on the facing page in my notebook, I've divided a sheet of paper into 6 different categories, and each one of those is the label of the club that I'm teaching for, and then it lists all of there's lines, and on each line I can list the patter call and the singing call that I've done at that evening, and then on the bottom of it there's a comment spot, so I can say, oh, I didn't get to this movement, or this one needs a little more work, or whatever. That really helps out. And usually on the comment thing, I will put that on the next page, because tonight's lesson is history.
Right.
And I move on. So it's on the next page that I need to look at what I missed over there. So that really helps out, rather than just have a checkoff list.
I use all paper copies also, and what I did is I went to the post office and got a bunch of the express mail or priority mail envelopes, the 9x12 envelopes, and I have one for each group that I call for, and I put my lesson plan in there. I found it's much easier to scribble on that piece of paper than it is on the computer screen, so that's why I don't use computer screens. You scribble on it once and it goes away, I don't know.
So I'm going to take the prerogative to say I'm going to present a little bit, and then we'll come back for some more general questions, because I'm going to generate some more questions on top of Mike. Let's have a nice hand for Mike.
Yep. So, great. Thanks. We'll turn it over to Bob.
All right, I'm going to start off by saying everything Mike said, and then we're going to talk a little more. I found it interesting. I have done it this way, and I have a different way. If we get to it, I'll show you my way of teaching Grand Square. One of the things I want to talk about is, in general, teaching is a progressive thing. And I don't know whether you've ever heard the term of a learning spiral. Have you heard about the spiral learning? Spiral learning says that you're building on what you already know, and as you learn more, you effectively are adding to it. So Mike said he gets them in a circle and puts on good music and has them circle left and circle right and so on and so forth. Well, what was the basis of that learning? The basis of what they're learning is what they know as human beings. And by that I mean, when you say make a circle, join hands, that's part of something we know we learned in kindergarten, or we learned somewhere in our lives. And so if we think of that as base learning, and then we start progressing from that, we're in this spiral. And every time, if we are using a teaching order that makes sense to us, and regardless of which teaching order you pick, picking one that works for you and works and supports the spiral learning, you will find that you will be successful. If you are teaching something that is too far up the spiral without the base for it, you will find that the students will not learn as well. So the key is when you're looking at your learning sequence, looking at it from the perspective of what do they need to know to do this? And a couple of things that I've gotten, for example, I use a lot of circles and stars initially. And I also use fractional things like circle left 3/4 or circle left halfway. And circle left, circle right, star left. And I have my own routines that I use in teaching that support that learning. And so you can teach a lot of things early on that are based upon the simple circle. Stars are actually a little interesting because stars have, in their purest form, you have to adjust to get into a star, you have to turn the star so far, and you have to adjust to get out of the star. And most people don't realize that when you say head star right, for example, you're stepping in and you're turning. That's the adjusting to get into it. So where's one time around? Well, one time around is right here. Do I really want to be here? I have to adjust out of it if I want them here, or I have to adjust the face somewhere. The other thing to realize is that when you're teaching again, stars don't have an end. If you say lady star right, and you go sit down and talk to your neighbor, they should be still starring right when you come back. Arm turns don't have an end. Turn your partner by the right. Around and around and around. They don't have an end. Allemande left does. Be very aware of the differences in these things. I've heard a lot of people using turn through recently, and I'm going, recognize turn through has a very distinct beginning and a very distinct end, and we misuse it on a common basis. Going back to my spiral learning, anytime when you're looking at something, and I'll use the example of grand square for the moment. You taught very first night, you said join hands, circle left, circle right, go forward and back. What's forward? Forward's this way. Backwards this way. When you get around to doing grand square, you got some people going forward, you got some people going backward. You taught them that they were going to use that. What's the first thing you have to teach a new dancer? You have any idea what it is? To listen. To listen. Because we're often teaching adults. And as adults, we don't really know how to listen. And that's one of the most important things. So when Mike got him up in a circle and he had him circling left and right, what did he do? He had him listening and learning a direction and taking an action. Think about that. That's actually pretty complicated. Now, kids will get it right off the bat, but adults won't get it as fast. So when you're getting ready to teach or you're teaching, think about what has to come first. Think about if you're going to do, if you're going to do something like pass through. Pretty simple call for all of us. All right, but what is a pass through? Well, everybody think about how do you describe a right hand in today's world? It's the handshake hand. Everybody can handshake. They know their right, they know handshake hand better than they know right and left. So if you say shake hands, take that hand, now drop hands and walk by that person straight ahead. They will get a pass through, and they won't try to do it left shoulder. And if you do it right a few times, they will actually be better dancers because they haven't confused that. And this is all about that progressive learning that I was talking about. And you have to do a pass-through before you can do before you typically would do a wheel around, for example. The teaching order, I have used my own CALLERLABs, the condensed teaching method teaching order, CTM, the Club 50 teaching order, which was the original pre-SSD teaching order. I've used the SSD teaching order, and I use generally, I use a derivative of CTM and SSD today. Now, what is the difference? You have to come up with a teaching order that fits your learning style and also allows for this spiral learning to occur, which means you have to have the basis for it. If you're going to use circles, you have to be able to get down to the point where you have fractions. Circle half, circle 3/4. When I get to the point where, for example, I will say, teach them lead to the right fairly early. And I may do something like, all 4 couples, I want you to lead to the right and face the wall on your right. All right? Everybody do a U-turn back. And then I'll do something else. But what I've got them doing is thinking about the walls and the direction. Now I can use that. I'm going to say lead to the right. Now, if I said circle all the way around, you'd be right back there, right? Yeah. If I said circle halfway, you'd be facing the wall that's behind you, right? Now, a lot of the stuff Mike said are things that I also use and do. As you teach more and more, you discover that all of these little pieces fit together. And one night, the way Mike does it works, and the other night, the way I do it works. Or he probably has that too in his box. So the point I'm getting at here is, so I led to the right and I did circles, and I went halfway, I went all the way, I went 3/4 of the way. One thing about 3/4 of the way is I now have facing lines, and I have some things I can do. And if I've taught ladies chains, then I can use that out of that formation as well as out of the square formation. The kinesthetic learner thinks of that ladies chain out of the static square as a different call than out of facing lines. We think of it as the same exact thing. But the kinesthetic learner is facing a line with a lady across the way, and that is a different square dance call because there's these other people over here. It isn't right. They think of it wrong and they feel it wrong. Now, also think about the fact that there's all of these different arrangements of people, and as people who think in terms of the pure call and it done within the foursome, we view that as being the same. If I turned this and got myself into an 8 chain formation, so I have 7 dancers ahead of me, my partner's beside me, and I said ladies chain, it's not a great call anyway because of the pattern, but things are not going to happen the way you want it to, because that's a lot harder than a ladies chain where I had the lines of 4. And why is that harder? That's harder because of the arrangement of people and the vision of the foursome. The other thing is if you're back in that 8 chain formation and you teach right and left through, when I do the right pull by of this lady that's ahead of me, I'm going to post a courtesy turn this one. Everybody sees this? Okay. Who am I going to work with? There's a lady here, and she might just be my original partner. I have a high probability that I'm going to want to interact with her rather than her. All right? So you have to work that, and you have to understand the differences in the difficulty associated with that. And in the progressive learning, if you start with the static square right and left through, you're going to be successful. Alan was mentioning that earlier today, somebody was talking about this, and we always say to the ladies, we say, we're going to do a right walk by. Girls are going to do a left turn signal, and the boys are going to take that hand. And if they don't, they're going to get it in the gut. Ladies are going like this, all right? And then you can courtesy turn and face back in. So think about it as you're doing that right pull by and a courtesy turn. Now, courtesy turn is actually one of the most difficult things to actually teach. Okay? So wheel around works really well for a long time until you decide you can get to the point where you can get the hand positions right. And you can get them to properly wheel around with the pivot point between the dancers.
We just told them it's a fancy wheel around.
It's a fancy wheel around. There you go. But it's still to be done smoothly and properly. You know, you do this right pull by and the lady's ahead, and if you get the hand positions, the guy is not ever going here and doing this. The lady's getting ahead, and he's almost going diagonally. And so thinking about that, showing it, that's where the show part of this comes in. A lot of this stuff you can show, and some of them will get it without the show, some of them will need the show, some of them you may actually get out there and dance it with them for them to get it. That's the kinesthetic part. And so I would encourage you, when you're thinking about this whole teaching thing, that you do this in the sense of all of these actions that you're doing. You're telling them, you're showing them, you're letting them read it by using concatenations or so on. Or reading the definition. Some of them will get it in very interesting ways. But I had a lady who's very kinesthetic this last week. We were talking about trades. And I said, okay, there are 3 things you need to know about trades. 1, you're going to trade with somebody. 2, you're going to trade from facing that wall to facing that wall. And number 3, if you happen to meet somebody, smile at them and pass by them to face the other wall. Every trade that we ever do will follow those 3 rules, even partner trade. So if you think about the world that way, and she went, that was the best explanation I've ever had of what a trade is. And she's one that has to do it. So I had lines facing out, and I said, girls, look at each other. Trade. Boom. She was there. Later, she was in a 2-faced line. I said, ladies, trade. Boom. They were there. She got it. And those are very different trades kinesthetically. But she got the concept. So as you're teaching, you have to think about all of these progressive things and the order that you do them in. And I'm sure all of you that teach are sort of going, yeah, we do that. But I want you to think about it more, because it's going to make you more successful the more you do it. You know, everybody, I've always taught right and left through, ahead of square through, and everybody's going, no, you don't do that, because they're always going to turn wrong on the square through. Well, I teach square through early, and I never have a problem, because of how I teach it. Okay? And now I'm moving it just because I'm gonna listen, and then I'll try to do it like other people do it. But you know, get your 4 people and get them over here to the side so they're working alone, and they're not working with, you know, in a square per se. And you say head square through 1. Okay, you got that? You just walk by, didn't turn, you did good. All right. Do a U-turn back. Do a square through 1. Okay, that worked, didn't it? Do a U-turn back. All right. What if we tried to do 2? All right. Now, I'm going to go through this and then, quickly, and then I'm going to show you an alternative. And I actually like the alternative in some ways, and I dislike it in others. So, if you square through 2 and you say, okay, see your 4 people? You gotta always be in that little box of 4 people. So, I'm gonna walk by, here's my box, I'm gonna turn into that box, and I'm gonna look at somebody new. Oh, hi. And I'm gonna change hands, and I'm gonna walk straight by. All right? You did good there, right? Okay, let's do a U-turn back. What if I was to go the other way? Go right hand. Which way am I going to turn to go into the box? Oh, I'm going to turn this way. And I'm going to walk by with the left hand. Good, we did 2. All right. As soon as they get 2, you can go to 3, you can go to 4. And they'll virtually never make a mistake, even when you're, you know, in this space here where they want to turn out of the box. Turning into the box is the key. Just my humble opinion. Buddy Weaver teaches it as a wrong way grand
That's exactly how I teach it.
and does it as a wrong way grand, four hands, and at the very end he'll say, face your corner. So we're doing this, face your corner. Works great. And if you think about it, now, what I like about it is as soon as you've done any wrong way grands earlier, you can do that. And by saying face the corner, you can get to the corner. And later on, 3 or 4 weeks later, you can say, okay, only go 3 hands. And you'll be fine.
Oh, Scott Brown from Pittsburgh. That's a very good point, but like when they're learning square through 4, they don't even know what a wrong way grand is. So I don't even bother with that. We just teach it as a right and left grand with the people across from you.
Okay.
Because it doesn't matter to them, they don't know what wrong way
They don't know which way is right
They don't
and which
know
way
what-
is wrong. Yeah, I understand. Yeah. So that, that's a good point there. So there's these things about how you teach something. Dave?
My comment on it is, after I've showed the movement, then I'll tell them it's a right-left grand going the wrong way with only 4 people. And on the last hand, you're going to pull by and step straight ahead. And then I follow that up with, if you count it backwards, 4, 3, 2, when you get to 1, that's the hand you always pull by and step straight ahead on.
Yeah. So, the good point about all this is these are different techniques. And so you as a teacher have to figure out what works for you and how you do it. You got another point, Scott?
Scott Brown from Pittsburgh. Just to add to that, I had a caller, actually a newer caller, show me something that was absolutely brilliant, that worked amazingly well. I said, what do you do about the kinesiology problem? And she said, oh, I never have a problem with it. I said, why? She said, well, I tell them, they're standing on a card table. Don't fall off the card table. So I said, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to try it. So I went back and I added that to it. And I said, now when you do this right and left grand with these people across from you, pretend you're walking around a card table. It's 100 feet high. Don't fall off of it. You got 3 lives. Believe it or not, it's brilliant. It works perfectly. They learn so fast and they're through it in seconds. And they're like, I didn't get it.
So I always, for years I said, okay, imagine this, you're downtown New York and you're on a block with a bank in the middle of it. And inside of that bank is $100,000. It's yours if you can get around this block without turning away from it. You got to keep your eye on it the whole time. So you're going to walk around that block all the way around and keep your eye on it, and you'll get the $100,000. Actually, it was a $100 bill in the middle of it laying on the floor, but so there's all these techniques, and I think the point I would make is you have to develop some techniques that work for you, and I got some other techniques that come out here that I like about other calls, but go ahead, Lawrence.
Not only that, Bob, but as they're walking around that block, if you turn the wrong direction, you're going to step off the sidewalk and that bus is going to come along and run over you. Don't get run over by the bus.
Don't get run over by the bus. So recognize that every call we have, as we're teaching, we're going to have techniques to teach it. And we were talking about square through because that was one that has been problematic over time. And so the point there being is, every time we come to a convention and we talk about teaching in any form, every call is got techniques to help the dancers. It's also got some things that every time I hear somebody talk about certain calls in a certain way, I shudder. The recycle of the center dancer, you turn back and wheel and deal, I shudder. It's very wrong. and I would heavily recommend you not using that technique. I recommend that you teach cross-fold for 2 or 3 weeks ahead of thinking about wheel and deal. And then you think about the fact that even the night you're going to, recycle, even the night you're going to do a recycle, that you do cross-folds for a couple of tips ahead of time. And then you say, okay, center person, you don't really want to let that end person get away from you. So as they begin to leave, turn and face them, follow them, and become their partner. If they get away from you, it's your problem, not mine. Yes, a little humor goes a long way in this kind of stuff. That kind of teaching of recycle works all the time. And we can get where we need to be. One of the other calls that is sort of problematic for some people is wheel and deal from out-facing lines. For years I taught it with left-hand couple step forward, two steps, and everybody wheel toward the center. Well, that works, but I actually came across a better one. Are you teaching couples trade from out-facing lines? If you make out-facing lines and you say couples trade, and you call that a few times for a couple of weeks, when you get around to teaching wheel and deal, tell them to do half of a couple's trade and bend the line to face the center. It will be exactly where you want them, and they will have done it in a flowing manner. And no, it isn't defined that way, but they will end up in the right place, and they will end up with the right body flow. So think about that as you're teaching wheel and deal from out-facing lines. It's pretty easy to teach wheel and deal from two-face lines. I still teach them to step forward, because in the case of a right-handed two-face line, you can say, everybody take 2 steps forward and wheel toward the center. And they will do a smoother wheel and deal than if they just crank it in. If you teach Ferris wheel, I put this mental picture. I said, when you get on a Ferris wheel and you're sitting in the chair at the bottom, what does it feel like it does to start? It feels like it moves forward along the ground, right? That's the motion you want. You want to think about it moving forward before it moves up. So if I do a Ferris wheel, I want that in-facing couple to go forward. I don't want them to go on a diagonal and cut through the middle of the wheel. So I want them to take at least 2 steps forward, tell the inside persons could join hands, even if they don't, and then finish the wheel. Creating that mental image in their heads of what a Ferris wheel does. Now, of course, the Ferris wheel actually doesn't move across the ground and then up, it goes in a circle. But it's the image of when you're sitting in that chair at the bottom of the Ferris wheel, you feel like you're moving horizontally. The fact that it's moving up is what the wheel does, but the feel is horizontal. And that's what you want them to think about. There are a million teaching techniques. If we were to pick a call and say, how do we teach it? Fact is, if we have any time left, maybe we'll talk about how Mike and I might teach a call in this respect. That whole concept of spiral learning, progressive teaching is absolutely critical, and if you can walk out of here with anything of, I would like you to think about, well, my teaching order teaches this, and it is made up of these 3 things, and do I get to those before I teach that call? In your teaching order. That would be the message I want to get across to you is, you need to get it. You need to think about what they have to know before they can learn what you're trying to teach. If they don't know how to make that little circle on the recycle, we probably ought to teach them how to do that little circle. And we ought to teach them how to do the cross fold. And then recycle's trivial. And it doesn't matter whether it's normal or has that shape. It doesn't matter, because they're going to do the exact same thing. They just have to know the 2 parts of that call.
But every call feels different from every position too.
Yeah.
Yeah, so make sure you walk them through it.
Oh yeah, I'm not saying that they're gonna, I tell people, I said, I learned how to square dance in 3 weeks, in mainstream in 3 weeks. Because it was to me, they said, well, and I said, oh great, I can do that. I know I can't teach like, they can't learn like I did. I know that because when I sat down to get ready to teach, I had to learn how to describe what it is I did. Because I knew how to do it. And that was the easy part. And I imagine many of you are in the same boat. It was much easier for you to learn and dance than the people you're trying to teach. And that's a critical thing. Let's go for questions. Questions? Anybody wonder how to teach a specific call?
Okay, so on the square through 4, we had a couple different ideas. I do square through 4 on lesson 1, first night.
I did the second tip.
Okay? And the most resistance I get is from the angels that are there. You can't teach square through on their first night. Why not? You know?
Ask them which one of them is
Yeah.
square dance called.
Right. And I get more resistance from the angels teaching than I do from, obviously, the new dancers, because they don't know. And that's what I tell the angels. The people on the floor, the new dancers, don't know what's difficult. We consider spin chain through difficult. New dancers, I could teach them that tonight.
Yep.
And they're like, no, you can't. It's like, why not? You know, when I worked at Xerox, I went to school in Leesburg, Virginia for 8 weeks. And my instructor's favorite saying was, we can teach chimpanzees how to build rockets. Do the same thing over and over and over, you know? We can teach whatever we want. They don't know it. As long as we have the teaching technique to do that, which, you know, none of us are going to compare to Bear, you know. So, you know, Bear's the expert here, right? Yeah. As he stands there.
Bear Miller is in the hallway.
Yeah. Okay. Square through 4. First night, what I do is, first of all, I'll teach them, like Bob said, facing couples, so they don't have all the interference. Then I'll get them in a square. I went to Harbor Freight, and I bought several pairs of what's called travel trailer or trailer positioning balls, okay? Little yellow balls on a telescopic rod with a magnet on the bottom. You put one on the trailer hitch, one on the truck, back up, and as the balls get closer, you know if you're lined up with the trailer hitch. They're like $6, $7 a set, okay? So I bought 4 sets. I got plenty for lots of squares. I will take, and because the base is real small, I will take that ball and put it in the middle of the square. And like Bob said, I make it a game. You're going to work around that ball, and your goal is not to knock it over because it's real flimsy, okay? And they have fun because they can't take their eyes off that ball where they're working around it, you know. And then you do it the opposite direction. And they don't knock that ball. Or if somebody does, the whole square goes crazy. Oh no, we knocked it over, you know. So it's a fun little thing. Just little gimmicks. Who said a new caller taught them something? You did. Listen to the dancers. Listen to different callers. Okay? I'm still learning. And it really is, like I said, listen to them. If they come up and say, well, you know, this is just like doing this. And it's like, yeah, it is. I never thought of that. Okay? Then listen to the new callers. They come up with some brilliant stuff that we never thought of.
Yeah, that's very true. We were doing research for a book on cognitively, on accelerating the teaching process. And people who knew about it were coming up to me with some brilliant ideas. And I had Bill Boyd come up to me from Florida when I was in Oklahoma City, and he says, hey, he said, are you still teaching step-toe wave? I said, sure, why? He goes, let me ask you something. I said, sure. He goes, what's the definition of pass the ocean? I said, pass through, face your partner, step-toe wave, because why are you teaching it twice? I said, that's a great point. I don't know why I've been teaching that twice. Never taught it twice again. Just teach past the ocean. When I do, part of that definition is step-toe wave. So why am I wasting my time teaching it twice? So if you listen to what other callers have learned over the years, and you can really pick up some brilliant insight into, into streamlining your teaching process, really.
So I was sitting at breakfast with Jerry Junk this morning, and he said, He said, years ago, he was sitting with Jerry Haig. And Jerry Haig said, you know, they were having a conversation about teaching circle to a line. And Jerry said, you know, that's not a problem. Circle half and the inside couple California twirl and the outside couple veer left. Done.
Yep.
And nothing about who's ducking under on that. And yes, it's a little bit out of line from the other line, but guess what? That'll all work itself out as it smooths out. Does everybody understand what I just said?
Bob was also talking about what's the first thing you teach? Listening. I don't teach that first. It comes like about third or fourth. I'll have them in Sicilian circles. Everybody know what Sicilian circles is? Facing couples, basically. I'll have them veer to the left. Okay? Shoulder to shoulder. Now move forward, veer to the right. You'll meet a new couple up to the middle and back. I'll do that several times. Veer left, veer right, veer left, veer right, veer right, and veer left. And everybody's going, oh yeah, forgot to tell you, square dancing is also an exercise in listening.
I don't usually say that they're learning to listen, but I'm saying to you guys that one of the skills that they have to learn, along with, you know, the very basics, the very structure of circling and holding hands and things like that, is listening. So yes, and you know, it's amazing. I did a party dance one night. We were in Sicilian circles, and I did that. I did the equivalent of a right and left grand with veer lefts and veer rights. And they had a great time. So being aware of that and all of those characteristics.
Lawrence Johnstone, Northern California again. Just like you were saying, oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
Sorry, I distracted.
Veer left, veer right.
No, it was right before he got into the veer left and veer right.
Listening.
Listening, that's it. Okay. Thank you, Bob.
So now we're all listening. Okay.
Yeah. But the thing to remember is square dancing, modern square dancing, is a process of the dancer, A, listening, and B, reacting to what you've just heard. And for most people, that is something that they don't do in their everyday life unless you're maybe a stenographer. But that's something that we are teaching in the class, right along with the square dance calls. We're teaching that process of listening and reacting.
And something I learned from Jerry Junk, going to his dances and class and stuff, is when you get to something that's a little bit different, it's like, okay, everybody listen carefully, and, you know, whatever the next call is. So just throw that little listen carefully out there, and their ears kind of perk up, like, yeah, okay, he's going to do something really weird now.
Bend the line.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And they'll all laugh. And what did we do? We introduced humor, which caused relaxation, which allowed you to go to the next thing.
It's got to be fun. It's got to be fun. Yep, by all means.
So, any other questions? Any questions?
Okay. Again, music and stars. Bob was touching on stars. When I first teach, like for example, head square through four, make a right hand star. Okay, teach them that, you know, when you get in the middle, head men, raise your hand, touch, make a left hand star. Ladies, whatever that guy in front of you does, follow him. Kind of like the Little Peggy March song. I will follow him, you know, follow him wherever he may go. And then, that's a square dance song. So on the singing call, I use, I will follow him.
I will follow him. So, we have no more than 5 minutes left over. We hope that this was a little bit different in the way you think about teaching. I would reiterate a couple of things. The setting up of a class, the running of a class that Mike presented, I think is really great stuff. And I'm glad you went down that path, and because I was going down the path of, let's look at the spiral learning. Let's look at the sequences that we put in our teaching order. Let's look at the sequences that are in the teaching orders that are out there, and let's figure out how to adapt to them. I will use an example of, out of the SSD teaching order. They teach column circulate before they've taught touch a quarter. Do you know how to get into a column without touch a quarter? Anybody?
Lawrence Johnston again. If you're in an 8-chain through formation, you can either have the girls do a U-turn back or have the boys run right.
Or vice versa. So, exactly. When you look at that teaching order, you go, pressure quarter's over here, but they want me to do column circulate here. How do I do that? And the first time you look at it, you go, okay, how can I get into that column? Exactly, that's just a little piece of information to put in there if you're following that teaching order and want to keep it in that order. That's how you do it. U-turn back is a very useful call that we tend to forget in that context. So,
James Chow from Morton Grove, Illinois. From an 8-chain through formation, having the girls on the left diagonal pass through, would that also put you in a right-hand column, boys on the ends?
yes. As I said, there's a lot, typically we don't work on the diagonal at beginner classes. So runs would be more likely, but certainly if you wanted to get them to think about the runs or the pass-throughs in that context, you could. I think I'd stay away from that at a beginner level because I want them to be orthogonal initially in that context.
I don't even know what that means. Scott Brown from Pittsburgh, PA. I don't know what the word orthogonal means. I'm going to have to go look that up.
It means perpendicular.
It means perpendicular. Everything runs on a perpendicular rather than on a diagonal.
Right. I'll write that down.
Learn something.
Certainly did. Did you know what orthogonal meant? Thank you.
We do try to provide education.
Thanks for that. That was way over my head, Bob. However, but for the people who, Bob's touching on something very, very important here, and that is the calls that are following are built upon the foundation of the calls that ran before them, and that's really important. And you call that kind of learning? It's spiraling. So the interesting thing about that is that if you're using the CALLERLAB recommended teaching order, it is not based on that at all. It is not based on spiral learning, and you need to understand that. It was put together 40 years ago, all right, based on what the callers at the time thought. All right, so it's not based on spiral learning, nor is it based on what's necessarily the best order for the student to learn in. So that's why he said that you need to find. In 1965, if you went to learn a language, you signed up for a language course at a college, right? In 1980, you plugged a cassette tape into your dash and drove down the road learning it. Today, you download Rosetta Stone and you're learning another language in a month. Times have changed, right? So does the teaching process and the learning process. And I just wanted to explain that the original lists that we have, that is not the best teaching order to teach this stuff in. So please don't follow that because you think you have to.
Well, and I will say a lot of that teaching order had to do with the choreography of the time. And the choreography of the time put together these sequences that were the modules of the time. And so therefore you had to teach this set of terms in order to use this module. So it was driven by the wrong thing, is what I think we're trying to say.
Yeah.
Bruce Holmes from Evanston, Illinois. But I would point out that the teaching order's been worked on and changed and shifted over the years, and I think right at this point it's a pretty good teaching order.
Not for that purpose.
It has got a different purpose, and we could have an argument about this all day long. I think the thing is that my comment, and I really liked the CTM teaching order in lieu of the SSD teaching order because it provided more wind in the face dancing earlier in my mind, in my humble opinion. And it's like somebody asked me how I am, and I say I'm great, in my humble opinion. I don't know about anybody else. But.
So the teaching order, that's why I said, if you change the teaching order off the CALLERLAB list, or it's not something established, write it down what you did as soon as you get home. I've got every class that I've taught on my computer since I started, and I'm still modifying the teaching order and the way I do it. Just because somebody will come up with something better, and I'm like, So if I move this call over here, it ties right in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're out of time. I very much would appreciate that you came, first of all,
Yes.
and give Mike a nice hand.
And Bob Briggs.